The toxic remnants of a stillborn planet hurtled towards Galarian. The Eldritch Eons had brought enlightenment and technology, but with worship fading, they would now bring the end. The elves fled, the dwarves prepared, but the humans turned to their gods. Their goddess of defense dragged the moon itself to shield them from the asteroid. The pieces ripped her apart and kept on coming. Her godly lover sealed the magic that kept it accelerating, consuming himself alongside it. He and much of the continent vanished, now turned to sea. The impact still blotted out the sky for centuries. But when the sun finally rose again, would there be anyone left to see it? Well, settle in, class. It's time we learn about my favorite Pathfinder apocalypse, the Earthfall. Are you ready for what might be considered Galarian's defining moment? Then let's go. We set the stage before the impact in the Age of Legend. The first empire of serpent folk had retreated from the nearby planets and eventually even fell at home. The mammals they kept no doubt played a part, and the cyclopses and dragons took their land as well, but what made them weak enough to fight to begin with was their war against creatures of the Elder Gods, invaders freed from their prison on the faraway planet called Earth. When the dust had finally settled with Hastur's flying horrors, humanity had found a new master. The Algothu are deep-sea creatures with wicked intelligence. They took humanity out of the caves and put them on the path of technology. Magic and tech combined to form wonders that few worlds had ever seen. Before long, humanity had risen to take the continent, with most serving those creatures without even knowing. They called themselves the Aslanti, on the continent of Aslan. However, the human who discovered their greatest power decided his rune magic should be shared with everyone. After all, his goddess taught that all good people should prosper, even these new elves. He founded a new empire of understanding, unknowingly sealing everyone's fate. With all working together, they grew like wildfire, and soon he had to split his rule. 7 rune lords, each with a province and gifted a kind of magic. They also had a virtue to embody, and I'm sure you know what's coming. His influence waned, and he couldn't keep up with the power of those less moral. They rose on the broken backs of their people to stand on the shoulders of enslaved giants. Eventually, he died in a really cool way. He was 110 and said, "Forget these wicked backstabbers, I'm wiping myself clean of this mess." He used his magic to melt his entire castle like a candle with himself as the wick. That's just cool. Anyway, obviously the Rune Lords of Virtue became the 7 deadly sins and grew in power through horrible means. Eventually, even the Aslanti started getting scared. I mean, they were about as strong as you could get. They invented vampires and their old boss became a demon lord, but the Rune Lords were really getting strong and weren't accepting a peace treaty. So the Aslanti rose in kind and grew arrogant and stopped obeying their masters. And every creature with sight beyond sight froze in terror. The Cyclops were among the first to make an empire, and their one eye could see further than any. Whatever they saw drove them mad, with their empires crumbling and a curse embedding in their blood. Apocalypse approaches and the destruction was unfathomable. The elves saw it too, but their seers were fewer and less gifted. Perhaps that's why they were still sane enough to simply leave. They'd been on this planet for a few generations, but it sounded like it was time to go home. At least that's what the majority thought, but a few did stay behind to try to survive. Meanwhile, the dwarves got divine word that when the world rocked, it was time to quest for the mythical sky. Granted, that does describe an earthquake, but they figured they'd know it when they felt it. But what could even cause such mass terror? It turns out the Aslanti's masters were just as arrogant and far more petty. They can make people aquatic, so they just need the surface to be uninhabitable. They found and bound the poisonous, which likely means irradiated, wreckage of a failed planet and diverted the core squarely into the Empire. This would wipe out everything, forcing them into the sea. But a couple of problems, first being that humanity has a lot of deities. Akava was the goddess of moon and defense, one of their main gods. Their capital city was devoted just to her, and shining light and revealing information on dark plots to end humanity was kind of her own thing. Being the goddess of the moon, she threw it in the way, though surprisingly not facing the part housing the blasphemous Supermax Moon Prison City, which is still fighting with half-lunar succubi to this day? What the also surprisingly, breaking them up didn't help. The pieces were still magically homing and the shrapnel shredded her without even slowing. The curse powering it meant that they were doomed, until the god of magic did something drastic. No, Amaznen didn't want to help anyone. He begged the Covenant to let this world die, but he was not going to let his lover's death be in vain. Fueled by grief, he drained the horrible magic into himself. He vanished alongside part of the continent when the impact made a sea the size of the Mediterranean. The ash cloud had kicked up, choked out the sky for 1,000 years, but we're still talking about it, so how did anyone crawl out of that fallout? Well, for starters, the elves weren't the only ones to leave the world. One group of humans pleading for escape was found by a dark deity known as the Widow, who made them a path to the netherworld. They still live in this dark reflection, populating cities like Shadow Absolom, but not ruling. They're usually called Fetchling, but they prefer chaos. The Widow didn't want anything in return and won't even respond to their prayers, so we still have no idea why she even helped. Whatever the reason, meanwhile, other humans were taking their chances with a different horror. The plan had partially worked, and they were turned into amphibians called the Azarketi by those fishy fools. However, just like with a meteor plan, the Algothu bit off far more than they could chew. After creating them, they ran away because even these lesser impacts destroyed almost all of their cities. Occasionally one will get taken back, but by the time things had settled down, they'd broken free. However, the tremors would be an issue because many fled underground. Humans are adaptable, and scattered groups of survivors eventually surfaced relatively unchanged. Some of the elves did the same, but many had fled deep, and in that darkness, terrors killed each other for a shred of food. They became hard and twisted by need, forming cold and hateful magic. Their new art form was flesh warping, breeding monsters like the Dryer. And look look away from the screen for a second if too many eyes freak you out, but soon the only thing binding them together was your neighbor being a little less likely to kill you than a Goglioteth. These things are like 30 feet tall and form groups of up to a dozen. Anyway, the screen is safe to watch again, but in the Darklands nothing is, and something was brewing even deeper below. The dwarves felt the whole planet shake, and that just had to be the signal. Some stayed behind in the deep dark, becoming the uptight Ringar, but most clans began the quest for the legendary sky. It would end up taking them 300 years because they decided to pick a fight with everything they found, including each other. Of course, the real problem was that the orcs weren't being destroyed like they thought. They were being driven backwards into other people. It's actually what drove the Kelid tribe of humans to surface early into the wasteland of Numeria. The orcs would eventually follow suit and spread all over the world, and the dwarves settled into the mountaintop they emerged from, hollowing it out to make the first sky fortress. Now, the tribe of humans got to see a massive spaceship crash, an arc ship made to spread life and technology, plants, animals, an abducted tribe from the next planet over, all sorts of stuff. It really helped Galarian bounce back, at least what survived of it after intergalactic horror shut the whole caravan down. It's been 9,000 years and they're still being picked apart. Yeah, the Earthfall was a while ago. It's 4725. Give it the times. Not that you could really tell in Numeria. It's still a barren land of irradiated post-apocalyptic barbarians cornered by orcs and demons, with no resources to build technology but plenty of future tech in those spaceship ruins. There's aliens coming out of stasis, robots, horrific eldritch creatures that were kept as prisoners of war. Who knows what you'll find in there? Though honestly, eldritch horror you can find pretty much anywhere. Among the remnants was a trapped great old one, Zamindor. Granted, it would probably be heading our way anyway, but it hitched a ride on the tracking spell. On the bright side, its growth was stunted when the extra speed made its impact destroy everything nearby. Eventually, heroes took out its cult, but they learned it could always come back as long as someone remembered it. They burnt down everything they could find, and thankfully the Tarask finished the job, but recently someone dug up its references, so now it's coming back. To be fair, it would have happened anyway. Some aliens and eldritch horrors that had been trapped by the serpent folk have finally escaped, so I guess we'll have yet another creature trying to possess minds and eat people to warp their bodies back to the living city of Carcosa. On the right side, at least those released horrors belong to Hastur, so soon they'll be trying to throw it out. Anyway, as for the dwarves, it's a long story that needs its own video. Let's just say their series of sky fortresses fell to their two most persistent enemies, orcs and infighting. It's just kind of what happens when a bunch of conservative traditionalists have to share a space. Tiny disagreements on how to follow tradition just drove them apart before being devoured by the enemies they made along the way. Of course, dwarves are still everywhere, they're just a bit more humble and looking for a way to reclaim their home. Speaking of which, the elves came back over 7,000 years later. Then they got really upset when people didn't give them back their land. Like, my dude, you abandoned us all for dead and let that kingdom get incinerated. That's not yours anymore, you gave it up, and also you're alien invaders. You stole that to start with, fuck off. The elves wound up settling in an old human ruin, and now they wander the land all sad. And before you think their long lives are warping their view, scale it to human years, and it's still like demanding that Bulgaria be given to you, the true heir of Kaisar. And also remember that some elves had stayed and regrown the world. They were perfectly welcome, and those elves had even less sympathy. You can't just leave the mess for them to clean up, then come back once the work is over. The sky's been clear for 6,000 years. What took you so long? And as for the drow, what's a drow? Are you okay? Oh, you mean that conspiracy, right? It turns out the stuff like flesh warping was actually the serpent folk. It just got pinned on the cavern elves because they're cutthroat jerks. Their brand of evil is politician, not crazed cultist. It all turned out to be some rumor formed by an evil cabal of wizards. But nobody wants to associate with those bastards of the beach anymore, so we made sure to clear things up. Anyway, you get the point. People either took shelter or fled and survived, but we still haven't covered the most important part, the Starstone. Whether it's leftover energy from Deicide or just the power of the planet, a piece of the main asteroid became a very special gem. An Aslanti man named Aerodin was called to the depths, and when he touched the stone, he endured the test. He was found worthy and became a god, one of humanity and history and innovation. He rose up the stone and the earth around it and founded the grand city of Absolom with it. It's basically Pathfinder's main city. It's called the city at the center of the world for a reason, and it's the biggest too. Right now, we're in the year 4725 AR, Absolom Reckoning. In Starfinder, the grand future space adventure, you better believe you'll find Absolom Station, and it just makes sense because so many gods are tied to it. Now the Starstone's in a big cathedral, and anyone can take the test. Only 3 more have passed in almost 5,000 years, but you can try. It's also why I say it's the most important event in Pathfinder. The ruins of a legend, the history of most species, global threats, the ascension of major gods, and the most important city. It all comes back to the Earthfall. And by the way, those 3 gods are not minor. There's Norgorber, god of assassins, thieves, and secrets, and fittingly, nobody knows who he was. He operates the seedy underbelly of the divine plane of Blah. He's always up to something. There's also Iomade, who's basically the god of paladins. She's the newest, and most of her followers were inherited from Aerodin dying. They were super close. Oddly enough, her crusade against evil has an exception for Asmodeus. Doesn't really trust him, but still goes to him for advice at times and actually lets devils try to compromise. And of course, my favorite of the bunch is good old Caden Kalian, god of drink and freedom and bravery. He was a mercenary who'd abandoned a job before his principals and took the test so blackout drunk he doesn't even remember how he passed it. Given how adventuring, freedom fighting, and having fun are his major things, he's an obvious hit amongst adventurers. And speaking of freedom, thanks for watching, hit that like button and leave a comment if if you'd like to hear more about the gods. I did some light reading and legitimately got inspired, and of course, thank you so much to my compy supporters, Snake Oil, Level 1 Cleric, and Modern Masquerade. Thanks for the support. Class dismissed. Now get me out of these chains before I strangle you with them.
Didn't think you'd be one to mind.
You're between me and replaying Deltarune, and that is a dangerous place to stand.
Sorry, boss, but you ain't going anywhere till we got a few episodes done. Hunting you down's hard.
I agreed to one, and you will regret that.
Those anti-magic chains are dungeon grade. Sorry, babe, but you're not breaking out.
Do you really think that little of me?
Boss, come on, we know you're good. That's why we took your equipment, your staff, your potions.
And watch me make more.
You made a grow our own coffee?